So good evening, everyone, and welcome to another session of the Urban Edible Spaces Forum. The forum is co-organized by the General Education team of CEDARS, the University of Hong Kong, and the Future Foundation. So CEDARS-General Education organizes HKU Edible Spaces, which is a community of students and staff who are interested in community building and promoting well-being through edible spaces, as well as promoting well-being. So, for example, if you've been to the main library, there's a herb garden and it's managed by this group. The Future Foundation was formed with the mission of advocating the usage of technologies and innovations to transform the city's unused space into used space and use space to a better place. So thanks everyone for joining us in person or online on Zoom. So today, the topic of the forum is urban farming as a method for building a sustainable and resilient future. I'm Sammy, a HKU alumni who was also a part of the Edible Spaces Ambassador Program, whereby students can join a series of workshops to learn about topics such as that are around revolving around urban edible spaces, including not only how to grow, but also topics like mindfulness and well-being, as well as community building. So today, we are very happy to have two speakers with us, Ms. Akina Ho, Head of Digital Transformation and Innovation at the Great Eagle Company, and Mr. Bjorn Loh, co-founder of Edible Garden City, Singapore. We also have Mr. Leo Loh, the conveyor of Future Foundation and the founder of PropTech, to moderate the discussion. So thank you all, Leo as well as Akina and Bjorn, for taking the time to come here and share your insights. So we'll first have Mr. Leo Loh to give a short presentation. So Mr. Leo is a trailblazer in the PropTech industry, and he founded Asia PropTech to synergize the forces and knowledge from PropTech startups, real estate players, and investors to co-create ideas and solutions. He has also set up Future Foundation, which I introduced earlier, and he will share more about it now. Pass the turn to you.
All right. So good evening, everyone, both online and offline. And thanks, Sammy, for introducing us to today's exciting topic about urban farming. So adding some more self-introduction, besides the innovation and PropTech things I'm doing, I'm actually a estate surveyor by profession. So that means I'm supposed to deal with those very boring, land matters, administration things, or real estate financing things. So that's why I step in to use more innovation, maybe to reshape, how real estate industry runs, or even how the city can, perform. So today I will do a very brief introduction or presentation from a land matters perspective on urban farming, and then I will pass to Bjorn to talk as an operator, as a great operator in Singapore. And then we will then move on to the panel discussion. All right, next slide. So yeah, I think Sammy has done the introduction. I set this up because I want to position Future Foundation as a social enterprise. As mentioned earlier, we want to do something by using technology or the deployment of some innovative solutions. It's not exactly equivalent to technology, but we can have some business model innovation. We want to turn some underutilized spaces in Hong Kong or other cities in the world into something more useful. So urban farming, I can say, is quite a prominent example, because in the past, we basically won't do farming at the downtown or urban area. But by technology or by some, for example, we are talking about vertical farming as a new technology, although today maybe we were talking more on the soil or farming for edible spaces. But because of the technologies, we can have more choices, we can have more options to do better for the cities. So next slide, please. So from these two pictures, you can see the comparison between a green roof and conventional roof. And you can see apparently that the colors are different. That means if we adopt kind of a green roof on the top of buildings, that can definitely reduce the urban heat, and also to do a better, say, energy control for the buildings. So it brings a better facilities management, and actually I think it's commonly discussed in the real estate industry as well. Because as a real estate landlord, I think maybe Akina will share more with us as a landlord perspective. I think it's very important nowadays to talk about how to monitoring, how to save the energy used by the buildings. And ESG is a very key topic here in both the real estate and also the finance world. Because if we have such green elements, if you're running your real estate companies, that would be better for you guys to position yourself as a green company, and may also do something more on the green financing. So many benefits. Move on to the next slide, please. And if we do the green building standards, according to some statistics, I think from the valuation point of view, it can boost up about maybe 5 to 10% of the value of properties or real estate. So this is very tangible. I mean, this benefit is tangible. Besides this, of course, if we do farming, urban farming, say on the rooftop or inside the building, I talked to some other operators in Hong Kong, for example, Rooftop Republic is a very prominent operator in the town as well. I think it's good for the interaction between teams, between companies. There are some big corporates in Hong Kong also engage the operator in the town to operate the urban farming spaces within their buildings or within their offices. So it's good. As mentioned, KPI for ESG. ESG reporting is now compulsory for all the listed companies in Hong Kong and also, I believe, other capital markets. So especially for those real estate developers in Hong Kong that get listed, they need to comply the ESG reporting rules, and then they need to produce every year the ESG report. And in those reports, they need to specify the KPIs. So I believe that, say, urban farming, if they put the facilities there in their portfolio, that would be also a good way for them to set the KPIs for ESG reporting. So for food and beverage services, of course, if you produce the crops yourself and enjoy yourself, or even to use the kind of plant to plate concept, that will also give some benefits, to the operators or to the tenants in the buildings, especially for those F&B. Next slide, please. And because I'm a surveyor, so I'll talk something more on the dollar signs. I think we in terms of real estate investment, I think traditionally we talk about residential, commercial, industrial, etc. But within our industry, we also talk about alternative real estate investment. And just like I mentioned in this slide, say if you use the space, rooftop, suppose it's an underutilized spaces, and then you may be able to charge about maybe 6 to 7 Hong Kong dollars per square feet per month to rent it out to an, say, urban farming operator. Maybe Bjorn may talk more about the price level in Singapore to us, but from a real estate investor's point of view, I think it is also a good way try to uncover or untap the valuation of the properties. So next slide, please. And according to a study conducted by Matthew Pryor, I think you guys are familiar with this professor. There's actually 40,000 buildings in Hong Kong, of which maybe about 30%, that is about 12,000 buildings, has a farmable rooftop. So it's huge. I mean, the number is huge, but nowadays we only have about 60 to 70 rooftops that have the urban farming. So that means it's a blue ocean. I believe that if there are many and more operators coming in town, of course, this is would be a great market. So next slide. And currently there's no laws and policies on whether to promote or inhibit, the use of rooftop spaces as farming purpose. But of course, we need to observe some, say, building regulations, and also we need to provide the sufficient or necessary facilities on the rooftop if you are doing the urban farming on the rooftop. For example, for every building, the net area for fire evacuation should not be less than 50%. So that means for some new buildings in Hong Kong, you can see, say, okay, maybe there are 40 stories high building, you can see the fire floor in the middle. But for some old buildings, if there is no, the fire evacuation floor in the middle, you need to use the rooftop. So that means the spaces left that is suitable for urban farming may not be that much for that old buildings or for those old buildings. And of course, if you want to do that, you also need to mind about the loading capacity, the waterproofing facilities, the drainage, etc. Because, next slide, these disasters, I'm not sure whether you guys still remember this, the rooftop collapse in Hong Kong City, some years ago. They put the urban, the rooftop farm or green rooftop on this building. But unfortunately, because there were maybe some continuous rainy days, that makes the loading much more higher than the capacity of the original rooftop. So it's rose to 5.75 kPa, but the approved dead load of this building is only 4.25 kPa. And according to some experts in this field, I understand that if you do the rooftop farm, I think you need to have the 5 kPa as the minimum, as the loading capacity. And if you do some detachable planters, that would be lower. The requirement that can be as low as 4 or 3 point something. But in this case, the original rooftop was only 4.25. So you can imagine it's quite dangerous. So, I remember there were no death causes. That's quite lucky, I can say. But imagine many students maybe walking under the rooftop. So if you do the urban farming, if you do the rooftop farm, I think this one is, we need to observe this carefully. So next slide, please. And this is an example, I think it's operated by Rooftop Republic at the rooftop of Bank of America. So this picture you can see what I mentioned, this is detachable planters. So it's a bit different from those rooftop farm. That is the soil directly placed on the rooftop. So next. In Hong Kong, I think nowadays is still a bottom-up situation when we talk about the urban farming. Although, in 2011, the BIM Plus it became one of the prerequisites in applying for the GFA concessions. And that is a cap of 10% of the total GFA concession. In the past, you can do more than 10. But now, if you get the BIM Plus certified, your GFA concession will be, capped at 10%. But anyhow, this is an incentive for the developers to, to put the green elements to get the BIM Plus certification, and then they can get more GFA. Next slide. And these two pictures are actually taken from CUHK, Chinese University of Hong Kong. This is the rooftop farm. It's not detachable planters. So you can see the benefits, many people doing the things here. You can see social interaction. I know the guys has participated in this farm. He's happy with his harvest, with his crop. But of course, for energy saving, again, you can reduce heat. we can have a more energy savings, etc. So I can say there are many benefits. I mean, in terms of doing this, but of course, we talk about if it's commercially viable for doing an urban farming business. Maybe I'm not the expert to talk about it. I can leave it to Bjorn to share more with us. Yeah. So currently, I mean the detachable planters, just like the one on the Bank of America Tower roof, which are not permanently fixed to the building, will not count it towards the green coverage. So we also need to mind, or we need to concern about the real benefits brought by the urban farm. Because if the urban farms are located on the rooftop, somehow I don't think many people are aware of that, because we are walking on the streets. We basically don't have any ideas about, okay, well, there is an urban farm on the rooftop. And in Hong Kong, for example, many rooftops are not that accessible. So this is the problem maybe in this town, in Hong Kong, to promote the urban farming on the rooftop. So next slide. This slide I want to show you, as I mentioned, I'm also working something on PropTech, and there's a PropTech company in the UK. They use AI, they use GIS, they use these LiDAR data, try to spot in London, for example, how many rooftops are suitable for, say, doing urban farming, or doing 5G installation, or doing the drone delivering facilities, etc. So as a tool that can give a very clear analysis to the investors, to the operators, how can we use the rooftops? So next slide, please. So I think it's coming to the end of my part. In conclusion, I think developers, if they can build a permanent, not the detachable one, rooftop farms in the podium, they can get more GFA concession, bonus plot ratio, and at the same time, that can definitely bring the benefits to the society. So I'm a fan of urban farming. I believe you guys are the fans as well. So I think this end of my part. Hope you guys can understand more about, from the land matters perspective, from the regulations perspective, how can we do the urban farming in Hong Kong. So yeah, that's the end of my part. Thank you so much. I think the time I will pass to. Okay.
Thank you, Leo. Yeah, I think so urban HKU edible spaces, we actually came up with a toolkit to kind of help people to set up the farm. And we did also put in stuff like, finding a surveyor to make sure that your rooftop has the correct loading and stuff, because those are really important and
crucial. Yeah,
crucial, very, very crucial. So next we have Mr. Bjorn Loh, co-founder of Edible Garden City, an urban farming social enterprise in Singapore. Bjorn is a practicing urban farmer and social change maker. His practice and research focuses on identifying the value that urban agriculture brings to the communities of highly dense and food import dependent cities such as Singapore. He has a keen interest on social ecology and how the rapidly aging population present a new opportunity for urban care farms to play a bigger role in the rejuvenation of cities. So Bjorn, I'll pass the time to you.
Thank you, Sammy, and thank you, Leo, for the introduction. I remember that year when City University roof collapsed. I was with Andrew from Rooftop Republic in Korea at a conference. And he had so many calls from the media. He was really stressed. But yeah, I think loading is such a big question when it comes to rooftop farm. So I'm just gonna share my presentation. Just let me know if you can see the screen. All right, we're good. All right, so I wanted to share a little bit of our journey, our philosophies, and the work that we've done in the last 9 years, and also where we are headed towards for the future. I didn't start in agriculture like most urbanites, growing up in Singapore. It was really within the journey of working in corporate and leaving that and working on farms. and really that there was a desire for me to search for a more self-sustainable life. I lived in a yurt with no electricity, no water for a good whole year. And you see that lamb, he keeps coming in and shitting on the floor. It was our pet. We named the lamb Dylan. And today my son's name is also Dylan. So tells a lot about the story there. But what I actually saw was that you could live very simply on a farm, growing your own food, making your own wine, making your own cheese. It's a very romantic, very idealistic thought and a process. But when I then went back to Singapore and started looking at agriculture and systems, I think globally at that time, 9 years ago, started to transition into uh, a more high tech, more high yielding space. So we see a growth in agri technology, vertical farming, controlled environment agriculture spaces. In many sense, this doesn't seem like a very romantic picture that I have envisioned. Wearing clean suits, going into a clean room, and harvesting vegetables, because it's really very stuck in that whole entire food system that is very neoliberal and very commercialized, capitalistic. But if you look back at the history of agriculture in Singapore, in the 60s, post-independence from the British, we were actually quite productive as a nation. We grew a lot of our own food. At that point, we were feeding 1 million people. We had a lot of pig farms. This painting was done by one of the very early farmers, O Chin Huat Farm. They were pig farmers before. And at that point, Singapore was producing 104% of pork. And we were actually exporting pork to the neighboring countries as well. So it was a very efficient industry. We're producing a lot of food. And whilst then Singapore's trajectory started to change, we started to focus a lot more on financial technology and biotech. And a lot of the farmlands were then vacated. Housing estates started coming out. Today, only 1% of our land is under cultivation. And that means that we have to import 90% of our food. But what the Singapore government has done to counter this is to have a diverse strategy on food sustainability or food security. So we import from 170 countries. And that is done in a deliberate manner because in respect of geopolitical challenges, we're able to command food from as far as Brazil. But what this really does is that, we tend not to really question a lot of times where our food is from, what kind of ecological damage that is causing to the environment through this incessant demand of food. If you look at this picture, this is taken in Malaysia, which is in Cameron Highlands. So it's the highlands where it grows. 70% of fresh produce grown here is exported to Singapore. Now, because of sort of weaker control standards, you can see that environmental protection is not really robust here. So you have land degradation, you have water table pollution, you have excessive pesticide use that also then pollutes the water table. So a lot of times we need to question ourselves as a high consumption nation, depending on surrounding countries, on what is that ecological price, and thus, the need for Singapore consumers to be more responsible in consuming these vegetables. So 9 years ago, when I came back to Singapore, I started looking for spaces to farm. I went to the farming area, which is 1% of our land, very, very small area, to look for space. But it was really hard to to get access to, let's say, 1 acre of land to start a market garden. And because it was just the barriers of entry were really high, you need to be a well-established company, very well resourced to be able to tender for the land to actually start a farming organization. So I was a little bit disappointed, right? I was thinking of going back to UK and starting a farm there. But when I started walking around the city and I see grass patches, that's left not used, so I was thinking whether we could start to convert these spaces into market gardens. And that really started the entire movement in Singapore in a way of adopting underutilized spaces. But we always want to use a very sustainable approach to how we design these spaces to create environmental impact and also community engagement. So if you look at principles and philosophies, predominantly a lot from the Western world, whether it's permaculture, biodynamic agriculture, these are philosophies on how to work with the ecosystem to grow food, right? And one of that is the food forest technique. And for a place like Singapore, which is tropical, a food forest actually works really well because it creates the aesthetic appeal because it is a forest, it's well dense, and there are a lot of fruits and vegetables growing in the top canopy level, which is the fruit trees, providing then shade and sometimes fertility to the lower story plants that are also producing food. To then the ground covers. I think one of the biggest challenge we have in most agriculture situations is the exposure of topsoil to rain. I don't know the type of rain that you get in Hong Kong, but in Singapore, when it rains, it really rains, and the drops are huge, and they will wash the topsoil away very quickly. And these ground covers then act as a barrier to protect the ground layer from erosion, thus keeping soil fertility in place. But these can also be edible as well, like the sweet potato leaves, the pinto peanuts, and such. Of course, the vertical layers, the climbers, the flowers that are edible, and also the fruits. And when you start to apply some of these principles and philosophies and working in a way that is in sync with nature and the environment, you start to see spaces turn into thriving biodiverse space. We tend to use a technique of green manuring, which is not to import a lot of fertility into our farm, but to use crops as a way to feed fertility into the soil. So as you can see here, we're using beans. So beans are legumes. They fix nitrogen from the atmosphere into the soil. And once they do that, we then dig them into the soil as a natural fertilizer. And once you kind of play around with these methodologies, you start to see the space explode in diversity, in productivity. This is a 10,000 square feet rooftop that we converted from a monocrop bougainvillea rooftop into a productive urban farm. And we look a lot deeper into underutilized spaces. I'm sure you know viaducts, they're quite common in cities, and we have many of that in Singapore. How do we activate these spaces to grow food? Again, with the lack of sunlight, so container farms were something that we explored. And putting them there as a sort of a test with the government agencies, we're able to activate the space for community and also for food production. But what we really saw through this process is that in every space that we activated with urban agriculture, whether it's an indoor farm when we don't have access to rooftops or light, you start to see community gathering. So these are people, like-minded people coming together, wanting to learn about the food system, wanting to participate in it, and wanting to talk about it. What is that future of food? So the outcomes from urban agriculture is pretty much intangible in many sense. It is the community activation and the community groups that you start to form. But also, when we started to explore further, this is one of the newer urban farms that we put on top of a shopping mall at Funan. Was purpose built. It became a point of environmental messaging. It became a point of education for the broader community to learn about food sustainability through closed loop systems, aquaponics. Um, it does not produce a lot of food, but I think the value really stays in the education aspect. And that is predominantly because urbanites are generally quite disconnected from the agriculture process. This is not a symptom that Singapore face. It is faced in places like Hong Kong, New York, London, Tokyo. Kids grow up thinking that the milk comes from the supermarket and not from the cow. So it's a constant problem, and we see that very a stark disconnect. But then people want to connect. They want to learn, they want to know, because you eat 3 meals a day, and you kind of feel that something is missing, right? If you don't know where your food is from, how to grow it. And a lot of our work really also is with educational institutions. We've done about 220 schools and institutions, working with them to build gardens and putting in educational programs for them. And really for me, kids as well, right? Getting them out from their houses, from their iPads, into the garden setting, it becomes a broader living classroom for them than just being at home and watching TV. And we modeled our social enterprise, of course, as a social enterprise. One of our major trust is to how do we elevate social challenges within the urban city, using our urban farms. And social employment was something that we have worked on for the last 6 years. Today, we employ 10 adults with autism on the farm, putting them into daily work on the farm, seeding, sowing, harvesting, and general maintenance of the farm. Again, this is how an urban farm can potentially solve some of the social challenges through social employment. And of course, the elderly, which is a group that we are actively looking at growing and impacting. And this is really through some of the work that we have done in the lower income communities in Singapore. This farm is called Akong Farm. So Akong, which is in Hokkien, grandfather farm. The pretext of this project was really to identify a social issue, which is marginalized elderly males that were mainly living alone in rented flats. Social services had a hard time targeting social help for them because I guess as a older male, you tend not to share problems a lot, right? So they're recluse, they are isolated. So this project was to bring them down into a garden setting, teach them some skills, get them to participate, get them to open up so that we could target social services help to them. And for me, running this project was 6 week long project. If you see that gentleman in black, Mr. Tan, he came down on week 1. He was always looking down. He was very quiet. He didn't say a word. You could see that he was socially isolated. He was a bit depressed. Yeah. By week 6 of the program, he couldn't stop talking. And I think that in itself shows the impact of bringing a community together. And he told me this anecdote, which was he has insomnia, and every night he will come down when he can't sleep to look at the garden. So it's a space of solace for him. So very impactful in the way that you can apply urban farms in community settings. So broadly, what we are working towards is that whilst urban farms produce food for the community, there is a broader impact that it can make on community wellness. And this is through mental engagement and psychological well-being, physical movements, and just getting in touch with nature. And this is not something that we kind of came up with on the fly. This is based on empirical research and data that we have done in collaboration with the National Parks Board of Singapore and the National University of Singapore. And the data was has showed through the studies that we have done is that we've taken elderly individuals into the program, put them through a series of urban agriculture programs. So whether they're doing seeding or doing some horticulture therapy type program, they took blood marker samples prior and after. And what they have seen is that there was actually a reduction in specific stress markers in the intervention group. So it's ILP6. So these stress markers are actually will cause inflammation in the body. So they address possible problems like dementia, arthritis, even cancer and things like that. So there has been quite a number of journal articles already published. And so this forms a very strong foundation for the future of care farms and how urban farms can provide a stronger social impact, community impact within the cities than just growing food. I leave you with a final quote from Masanobu Fukuoka. If you haven't read his book, The One Straw Revolution, do read it. And it says the ultimate goal of farming is not the growing of crops, but the cultivation and perfection of human beings. And this is really the sort of the holistic view of where urban agriculture can go and should go. So I thank you for your time and your attention.
Yeah, thank you, Bjorn. I actually had the pleasure of going to Citizen Farm about, I think, 4 years ago, and it was like a great experience. Again, also getting to know other people, eating a black soldier fly for the first time, learning how mushrooms are grown, and so on. We'll now move on to the panel discussion, and Bjorn and Leo will be joined by Ms. Akina Ho. Akina is the head of digital transformation and innovation at Great Eagle. She has over 20 years of experience in change management, innovative technology, consulting, finance, hospitality, and global sales operations management. So currently at Great Eagle, she is leading a new department to execute digital transformation and innovation. She's part of the investment committee that evaluates startups in cutting-edge technology and disruptive business models across different industries. So yeah, hi, Akina. And I guess we'll...
Yeah, Akina. So it's cool to have Akina with us because I think I know Akina very much because we were always on the same panels in other real estate innovation conferences. So this time I think the topic is a bit different from what we have discussed before, but maybe if it's great if you can share with us what Great Eagle has done about, say, urban farming or indoor farming in your portfolio. Maybe you can give us a very brief introduction. Yeah.
Well, we haven't really built what we have seen on those buildings, on JLL buildings and stuff like that. Our restaurants have started urban farming in a minute scale for herbs and stuff like that. Because they use fresh herbs and stuff. And I think we supported actually one of the startups we picked as a winner at a hackathon in 2018.
I think it's back to 2018, right?
Yes,
the
2018.
hackathon I organized.
Yes.
Okay, yep. I remember.
Yep, so
that.
we actually doing that. So that's the first step because, but the second, it's not urban farming, but urban garden. We built gardens on top of our buildings to allow a green it's similar to what Bjorn was talking about. It's in space where people can go and relax and look at nature and get reconnected again. So we have done that for our LP Langham Place Mall, and also on the Three Garden Road, there's a little patch there, especially in I believe it's the LP Mall. It's like a little garden. You can go up and then walk around and look at plants and fruits and stuff like that, and flowers, of course. Mm-hmm. So it's a big step forward from where we were 3 years ago, but still lacking in behind what you guys are doing right now. So.
Yeah, but I think because I know that you drive lots of innovation initiatives in your company, and as I mentioned, because there's a compulsory requirements for all listed companies in Hong Kong, they need to produce a kind of ESG report every year. So as you know, your company is also a listed developer in Hong Kong. So do you think the farming, the indoor farming or urban farming, or any green things that can grow on your properties portfolio that would be beneficial to the ESG initiatives?
So I mean, like putting plants into the building, it's one of the way of helping with the carbon dioxide. I think that's being looked at. We put tell the truth, I don't have access to the plan because it's actually managed under a champion REIT, and it's a different separate entity. Majority shareholder is Great Eagle. So, but we have won a lot of wellness ESG awards, right? So I don't know what is their plan, but they are targeted to do more stuff that is ESG related. But are we saying that urban farming really is the only option? It's not. It's one of the options. And it's not like every commercial building is going to put a farm on top of the building in the near future. Because that I think Bjorn mentioned that. It's a very expensive endeavor to do, right? And then what is the commercial value unless you have a lot of funding, it's nonprofit. And then you're just going to do this for the sake of, for the society and the goodness. And then, of course, and it moves faster. But from an ESG perspective, urban farming, it's not sorry to say, it's not a big priority for, maybe because awareness is not there. A supporter of that initiative is not there in Hong Kong. And then a lot of them are really focused on commercial value, meaning like they do urban farming for plants and for vegetables and for herbs that they can sell to supermarkets, which we are start to see a lot of hydro urban plants and veggies that you can buy from, right? And so that's missing.
Yeah, I know that. I know an operator in Hong Kong. I mean, some years ago, actually, that company backed by a major family in Hong Kong. They try to do something indoor farming at some of the industrial premises, but eventually, I don't think they continue to do that. So in Hong Kong, we are such a city that is too commercial, and somehow it's not easy to carry out the things. Maybe let us turn to Bjorn. Say maybe we would also like to know more about from the commercial point of view. What's your company doing, or any particular types of crops that is more commercially viable, or just share with us and at this angle, the business model and also.
Sure. I guess for starters, what I can share is on government policies in Singapore. As you know, Singapore is well known as a garden city, and this is predominantly driven by policy. And all commercial developers have to develop green landscape spaces. We have this policy called the landscape replacement area. So depending on your total GFA of your built environment, you have to correspond that with landscape area. Therefore, you see a lot of buildings in Singapore having rooftop gardens, green walls, and green spaces in spaces that you wouldn't think you could put green spaces in, right? You're just forcing it in because you have to reach this threshold of the landscape replacement area. Now, this actually in itself, because the infrastructure is already available in Singapore, right? The rooftop gardens are there, the planters are there, the drainage is done, loading is already considered. These for us are ripe for conversion. So we can easily go in to rescape the space with food producing plants at a much lower cost. So we don't have to set up from ground zero or baseline, right? The challenge always with urban agriculture is because agriculture works on an economies of scale economic framework, right? So you need to produce in scale to actually be able to get some margins off of your crops because food is so cheap at this point of time. And urban farming is constrained by space, expensive land area, and of course, then you see actually the resurgence of or the growth of vertical farming. But vertical farming itself is a very expensive endeavor because you have to build infrastructure for the vertical farms to be in, and these can be very costly. And that's said with the land tenure that we get for urban agriculture in Singapore is roughly about 9 years. It's a 3 plus 3 plus 3. So for a lot of the businesses that are evolving around just growing produce and selling it, it's very hard to survive. So business model wise, what we have seen is that it needs diversified revenue streams. So growing crops is one. And probably just roughly break even as an endeavor. But what really the value comes is really in the programming, the activities that we can actually generate from agriculture activities. So people come, they do a workshop, they learn. We have done farm to table experiences, farm to bar experiences. We work with gin brands to make cocktails, pluck the herbs and things like that. So it's just being, I guess, very creative in the approach. Will create the kind of buzz around the space, and I think also largely a lot of the developers they already have a sunk cost for landscape maintenance, for example, right? They have to maintain the landscape. So in some sense, we are actually working in this sector and rediverting those funds to create purposeful landscape and purposeful engagement in those landscapes using urban farms. And for the developers, then what it gives them is actually increased footfall in the mall because people are coming maybe specifically to attend an event or a workshop at the farm and then going in to the mall to consume something. So for them, they measure that as their KPIs, right? Footfall into the mall, community engagement, and eyeballs on the space. So the metrics change quite a bit for the developers, per se.
Oh, all right. Thank you. You mentioned about the program you provide to the maybe your clients. So I know that in Hong Kong, some corporates or big companies they recently they engage the operator just like you to do something like team building for their companies. Do you think this is good, or any special experiences you can share with us? Say, have you dealt with the companies or corporates in Singapore by providing the program to them? Because from your slides I see a lot of at the social level, but how about the corporate level? Yeah.
Yeah, plenty. We have done many corporate events and also collaboration with brands at our urban farms. So this is in sense how we monetize the model to then direct those funds into social causes as well. So that is definitely a big space for CSR, and a lot of companies today are looking for alternative experiences and coming to the farm for team bonding activities, doing their meetings, away meetings. Instead of a hotel, they come to an urban farm. Is very novel for them. But today, what we are seeing with lockdown and COVID, when there's a fresh respite, when they are able to go out, they come to a farm. That's a whole wellness aspect that we are.
Connection problem issues. So anyway, maybe Akina, are you here? Bjorn mentioned that Singapore is definitely a garden city, and Hong Kong, we are quite, we get a name of a concrete jungle for Hong Kong. And I know that your company has just developed a new residential development in Pak Shek Kok, that near the Science Park. So can you tell us any, no matter how the size of it, because I know that there are some vertical farming facilities, although it's small, but in some new clubhouses, in some new residential projects. So I'm not sure whether Ontolo, your project, also includes such things, or if not, or if yes, the reasons behind. Yeah.
Well, I can proudly say Untolo did a wonderful job in allocating a huge space in terms of for real estate in Hong Kong, an area right in the middle of all the buildings, a garden.
Yeah.
Right, and that allows people to feel nature, because Untolo property is facing the ocean, right? So literally, we have ocean view. Yeah. So you have ocean in front of us, then we have a garden in the middle of us, and then we have mountains in back of us. From a Chinese perspective, that's great feng shui, right? So it's that's one thing. It's to making sure the resident who lives there gets the best feng shui. The second thing is that we know how busy life is in Hong Kong, and when you go home, you don't want to face four walls again or concrete, like you said, concrete jungle. But now you can actually have a little garden. You can go and walk, where the trees are tall, the plants are all hanging over, the air. So when you walk in there, you really don't see the building as much. So you can actually can imagine yourself being far away, to relax and to breathe, and also to kind of meditate a bit, when you're there, because there's like little pathways where you can diverge into different areas. So that's the behind of building that little garden inside Untolo. And we do believe in that. Mental healthness.
Yeah. I think nowadays in real estate industry, we also talk about the wellness concept.
Yeah.
Say not only, the hardware, but also try to allocate the spaces in real estate, maybe some spaces allocated to the green features, or some of them are allocated to the mingling spaces that will increase definitely the well-being of the occupants, occupiers in the real estate. So maybe my last question, maybe after that we can pass to the audiences. So Bjorn, I think your company is doing great in Singapore. Have you considered to come to Hong Kong? Is Hong Kong a good market for you? Because Hong Kong is we have bad names like concrete jungle, and also we are weak at food production, self-production for the food. Or any advices you can give us, say how to use urban farming to boost up the food production in Hong Kong. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think Hong Kong is weak in this space. You have a great social enterprise in Rooftop Republic driving that movement in Hong Kong, and the leaps and bounds they have done in the last few years. I think for us, we're keen to explore overseas markets, but not in a way of starting edible garden city in those cities, but really working with local partners like Rooftop Republic, sharing ideas, open sourcing our models, so that they can adopt that, because we feel the impact can be made a lot faster working with local partners that are already in the space, so that impact can come a lot quicker. I think for Hong Kong food security, uh, it is not such a major challenge because you can there's always the motherland that you could fall back on in many sense, in terms of food production and things like that. Whilst all Singapore is a little bit more geopolitical challenge, right, in the surrounding areas. So for Hong Kong, you have HO establishment like Kaduri Farms doing very good work in sustainable agriculture. It's really about bringing those fundamentals ethos into the city. It's really about educating the urban people about food growing, and that really then changes people in the city to think differently, so they know actually food is not so easy to come by. It's actually quite hard to grow your own food, right? There's a lot of challenges, failures, and in itself there's life lessons, and also then they'll appreciate their food more, waste less food, and also then consume more responsibly. So choose food sources from sustainable sources, and I think that in itself, the mindset shift can change the way Hong Kong consumes and make it more sustainable community. So I feel that also if urban farms can also solve social issues. So for example, if there's a rise in mental illness and challenges and dementia within communities and housing areas in Hong Kong, potentially urban farms, when set up in those spaces, could provide some wellness services for these groups of people. Then the government will look at it very differently and start to open up spaces for this to come in, because you're helping them solve not only food security issues but also social issues as well. So I think that the double fold impact is always a lot more welcome as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think that really kind of reminds me of one of the forums, part of this series, whereby Mr. Matthew Pryor talked about the social value of farms beyond production. If that's not the focus, then how can we make a case for the other values? Let's see if we have any questions from the participants in the theater or any questions online. Yeah, I can also share about a project that we learned during... Oh, there's a question. Okay.
John mentioned a book that we should read. Can you repeat that? Because it was sort of quite passing. Thank you.
Yes, it's called The One Straw Revolution by Masanobu Fukuoka. So it's a beautifully written book about a very low impact approach to agriculture. Basically, he calls it the do nothing farming. So it shows that actually agriculture is not backbreaking labor all the time. If you are able to work with your environment and ecology and understand that, it can actually be very productive with very little work. I've tried that on a few attempts. It's not so idealistic as it sounds, but I'm getting there, I hope, down the line.
Other questions? If you have any questions, you can raise your hand. Yeah, I was going to share about the Kaduri farm. So they actually collaborated with the government on a revitalizing historic buildings project to revitalize the old Taipo police station. So it was meant to be like a heritage conservation, but then they actually inbuilt a lot of components of a permaculture garden there as well. So they have a kitchen there that serves the food, and it's also used as a care farm, basically. And I think it was really quite successful in kind of building that community. So I think there's a lot of possible like place-based innovation that can happen, whether in Hong Kong or in Singapore. Maybe one question for everyone would be like, what do you all think like students can do, right? Because it's like if you can't have access to land or like investment, what can we do to be part of the movement?
I think I don't know, because personally I do some farming at my home, I bought some devices that is very simple devices. You can buy it at a lock-on or online or other other things, and I'm really satisfied after I got the tomatoes and also I get the herbs such that I can use that. I think it's very good for I just feel happy. So I think Hong Kongers nowadays are not that happy. Maybe properly we can use urban farming or just grow your crops at your home, at your balcony. That's something I strongly suggest. Yeah, you guys can do and participate in it. We don't need to do some great investments, but just do it. Yeah, that's my suggestion. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I second Leo on that. I think the process of sowing a seed, watching that grow, harvesting it. So, a lot of times I tend not to eat the food I grow because it's a bit of heart pain, right? After you have spent so much effort growing it. But I think the satisfaction in that and the lessons that you learn, even when there's failure, teaches you a lot. I think nature is in itself a very powerful teaching force, and you learn a lot through that process. So really get your hands dirty, go and volunteer in a farm, Rooftop Republic or Kaduri, go for classes, just engage with nature. And I think it's so therapeutic in its own sense, and take that small first step. Yeah.
I saw a question maybe coming from online.
Okay, so the question is about the volume of food that can be grown in the rooftop area. So the volume might not be enough for food security issue. So yeah, would that be a concern, or how can that be overcome?
Yep. So I think predominantly urban agriculture has been focused on growing green leafy vegetables, right? Because for a fact that it's has a quicker cropping cycle, so seed to harvest is a bit shorter. You can stack them in vertical systems, and also they don't transport well. So they make a good business case to do so. And I mean, there's been a lot of debates around food security. What about the rice? What about your fruiting vegetables like tomatoes and things like that, right? But predominantly the urban ag industry has been structured around those crops at this point of time. I think in the future it starts to evolve when the systems do evolve and technology do evolve and approaches do evolve. But at this time is really the concept, the idea, and really testing out the model at this point. So you've seen actually a lot of the controlled environment agriculture farm, which Leo has shared earlier, has not predominantly taken off very well because the economics of it is not stacking up. So the system components are expensive. Energy usage is very high because you're running LED lights and also cooling systems. And you've seen these large controlled environment agriculture farms heavily funded, like even $10 million in the US. They have closed down and failed. So there's a fundamental challenge with the model. So what we have focused on a lot in the last 5 years was to grow high value short cropping cycles plants. So microgreens, for example, which was a lot more imported to Singapore from Holland in the past. We are able to grow it locally with a social business model by employing adults with autism to do the work. We also grow edible flowers, which again is a longer cropping cycle, but is very high value. So we supply to about 100 restaurants in Singapore. So that in itself it's a business model on its own. But what this brings then is when you have that farm that's operational, that is beautiful, that's productive, the events and the programs that we run supplement the income to make it financially viable.
Yeah, thank you. Does anyone have any other questions? Oh, we have a over there. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, Bjorn. Thanks for sharing. And I'm just interested about urban farming, and I know that there in Shenzhen, there's a company that they also doing urban farming, but like they're planting without soil. So that really interested me. Like if you plant with soil or you plant without soil, that make the plants like a difference in the qualities. And a second question is, I don't clearly know that if you have already like doing the project in Hong Kong already or not. Like if you will come to Hong Kong, do you consider like to cooperate with NGOs? Like some of the NGOs will like help refugees or homeless people, and that might become a program they could involve and help them to like make some income through this way. Yeah, that's two questions.
Yeah. Thank you for your question. Yeah. Yeah. So of course, preference-wise, everyone has a preference on approaches to growing food, and I'm more tuned towards soil-based agriculture because of my training in organic and biodynamic agriculture. And I think it's also down to taste as well. I do feel that soil-grown vegetables do taste different. But again, growing plants without soil, so whether it's aeroponics, hydroponics, or aquaponics in itself, are not new technologies. They're not new ideas. If you look at in Burma, Inya Lake, they have used the principles of hydroponics for hundreds of years, growing tomatoes on the lake. Or even I think back to the Aztecs or Incas, they were already practicing certain forms of hydroponic growing. Today, the technology has moved on a little bit more to lighting technology and reducing the mist size and trying to solve some of those problems within that space. However, I think when there has been studies done by NUS on differentiating between hydroponically grown vegetables and soil-grown vegetables, they found in the studies that hydroponically grown vegetables are actually lesser in certain nutrient contents. So they were looking at two major groups of nutrient contents, carotenoids and glucosinolate. These are major health, public health nutrient markers that they were looking at. Actually, hydroponically grown vegetables has a lower density of those nutrient components. So the professor that was working on it, he really advocates soil-based growing as well. So there are these nuances within these two. However, hydroponically grown vegetables are a lot more efficient. They grow a lot faster. They grow a lot bigger because you're putting the vegetables in the optimal condition. But there's always an argument that when you put plants in a natural environment, they do get a bit stressed from the environmental factors and things like that. They actually build up resistance in its immune system in itself. And when you eat those vegetables, you are also taking in some of these phytonutrients too. So that's arguments on both sides, and we just need to find that balance between those. In terms of Hong Kong, No, we haven't actively looked, but definitely if we were to come in, it will be probably something that we would love to do with Rooftop Republic as a joint project. Having known them for so long, it's something that maybe we will explore something together. And then that will also be on a very social angle, so working with potentially NGOs or communities on the ground to drive some of these movements. Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you for the question. Maybe Akina can respond to the question I posed earlier. And I also have another question for you, which is kind of related to, because Great Eagle is quite an international company. So do you think that there's like a difference when it comes to Hong Kong, when it comes to the opportunities or at least maybe the regulations or the environment when it comes to promoting urban edible spaces in the developments compared to like other cities or countries that you might be operating in? Yeah.
So right now, I can't say to that really, because it's not something that it's not top of our priority because of COVID, right? Right now, COVID, people don't even come out of their home. In certain countries, there are lockdowns, right? And we have hotels in those areas. For us to build like urban farming or doesn't make sense because no one's going to go and plant anything. So it's not because we're not thinking about it, it's because it's not a priority right now because of the situation we're in. Regulation might change the attitude, but I think that urban plants, having plants inside building, it's going to be the trend, right? Any new residential property and hotels will add elements of that because it does help with the oxidation in the air, right? So, but until I think the governments or countries are more in control of COVID, this might be a very hard thing to do. Hong Kong is a very, very lucky place. No one lives as freely as we do, okay? And I have families and friends all over the world. And we are just living as if COVID doesn't really exist, except when we have a mask on. We kind of, or like limited, amount of people can dine together. But everything else, we're going out, we're chatting, we're having fun, we're having parties, and all that stuff. In other countries, they don't have that. So hydroponic herbal farming is not a priority right now in anybody's mind. Sorry to say, but maybe Hong Kong is more so because we're free to do that. Other countries, I think they're going to be either focusing on technology for ESG, technology to prevent COVID, energy efficient stuff, right? Safety, right? These are what property developers are looking at right now.
Yeah, thank you for your perspective. I think that's very important. Maybe on the topic of COVID, maybe we could maybe get Bjorn's ideas on how COVID has affected the trend from your perspective as well.
Yeah. So on the flip side, I wanted to share what we've seen actually during COVID was upsurge of interest in growing your own food at home. When people start to see empty supermarket shelves and supply chain disruption, it instills some fear into them, and I think not knowing how to do it became a disability for them. So we saw an upsurge in people wanting to learn, to participate, and then also to bring it into their home. So we had a lot of requests from people wanting to build their own gardens at home in whatever limited space that they have, and also we saw upsurge in subscription of our vegetable box because people were also in the mind that we should support local agriculture so that we have a more robust local food system. So that those are all signs, and this is not something that is only in Singapore. I think counterparts in Philippines has also shared that during COVID and lockdown, because people are just staying at home a lot more, they are starting to tinker around and grow plants. So the big upsurge of ornamental plants, indoor plants has grown crazy over the last 2 years. So has growing your own food at home as well. So in Philippines, we've heard similar instances in Indonesia, in Australia, which I'm in now. We see the hardware store. They just sell out of seeds, vegetable seeds, because people are just buying them and planting because you're spending time at home. All the fertilizers are off the shelf and all of that. So it's a trend, but trend-based stuff, it comes and goes. We see cyclical cycles as it goes, and this is possibly one of that waves. And when everything goes back to normal, people tend to go back to their old habits, the old. Then when the next kind of challenge to the supply chain disruption comes, and then the interest will pick up again. Yeah. So on the flip side, yeah, we see quite a growing interest in food growing at home.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, I think some people get a pandemic puppy, but some people become plant parents during the pandemic. So it's quite interesting. Does Leo want to have any last words, or maybe share a bit about what Future Foundation is doing? Is there any projects?
Yep. And I think our organization, as mentioned earlier, is trying to turn some underutilized spaces in the city into some useful spaces. But as a surveyor in Hong Kong, I think we also need to observe the regulations here. We need to work with the governments closely as a think tank and do tank in order to make the projects realized. So urban farming definitely is one of the areas we are invested, we are doing the research on. And and other areas like say underneath the viaduct, the highways, can we turn it to some recreational playground, for example, by using technology or by using some business model innovations, would be also one of our works. So thank you so much. I think today I'm happy to have Akina and Bjorn to share with us about urban farming. Again, from my point of view, I think it's quite boring, but for me, I think the loading capacity, I need to emphasize this is very crucial when doing maybe Bjorn, when you come to Hong Kong to work with Great Eagle, with Akina, maybe you guys can should think about it. Yeah.
Actually, I think the example you shared just now, CUHK, the rooftop is actually designed to be part of the building when they design it, which is why it's soil-based and not using planters.
Maybe it's easier for new developments, but for old one, I think we should be careful.
Yeah. And just now the speakers were talking about how you can get your hands dirty. So that's exactly what Edible Spaces in Hong Kong U does, to give you the opportunity. So if you're interested to, try out some urban farming, there are some herbs that are grown there. You can always go there and smell the herbs and, play with them, smell them. But there might also be workshops that might be organized. I think just recently we had the green market and people were able to take some of the herbs home or some seedlings home, and then you can try growing food at home. I think there was also a grow food at home challenge. Yeah. So that's the end of today's session. So thank you all again for your time, including the participants as well as the speakers. So continue to look out for future events organized by CEDARS-GE. And you can also follow Edible Spaces on Instagram for future events and maybe more sessions of this forum. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.